If the United States wants to get people to wear their mask, they should just put on Peninsula and tell them, hey, if you don't wear it, this is what's gonna happen. I'm gonna go put mine on right now. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review, and today I'm diving into the sequel to Train to Busan, Peninsula. I'm so excited for this movie, and I was actually not even anticipating it because I didn't know it was getting released this year. When I found out, I was so excited, and I'm really grateful to Wellgo USA Entertainment for providing me with this screener link, because if not for them, well, I can't see it here in South Florida, so it's such a blessing, and I'm just so excited to talk about it today. There are some things I liked, and there are some things that I didn't really care for, but hey, before we get into that really quickly, guys, if it's your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I talk about movies and TV, and yes, I review them early, so if you want to see more of this, go ahead and hit the big red button below and subscribe to the channel, and go ahead and tap on that bell so you don't miss out on anything new. Kind of like a DC fandom coverage this weekend. I am so excited for that. And if you haven't, go ahead and smash that like button and get loud in the comments below. If you've seen this movie already, let me know what you think, but if you haven't, are you excited for it, or are you not excited for this movie? Alrighty, so enough talking, let's get right into Peninsula. Now, if you're not familiar with the story, it takes place 4 years after the events of Train to Busan, and we follow our main character, Jung-hyun, and he is trying his hardest to make a living, and unfortunately, after a failed attempt to get on a boat and away from one of these hotspots, well, he has to now work for a mobster group, and this group of gangsters asks him and his brother-in-law to go into this port city and find a ton of money, and they'll be millionaires if they bring it back. Well, you kind of know what happens, right? They get to that, well, port city, and yeah, it's kind of a rough time. And our main character finds some nice people and some not so nice people. We'll talk about it, but guys, I'm not spoiling anything. So let's get into the positives here. What worked really well for Peninsula is what worked for Train to Busan. See, in the first film, it focused more so on humanity and its downfall versus the zombies. Now, in the second film, it focuses a lot on the zombies, don't get me wrong, but honestly, it focuses more so on how humans can be so greedy at a time like this. Now, there is this group that our main cast kind of comes along, and they're called Unit 631. They are awful human beings. What they do is they throw people inside of an arena, like Gladiator style, and sick zombies on them. That is awful. They call them dogfights, and throughout the entire film you start to notice that the leader of Unit 631 is very much for himself. He doesn't care about anyone else, and there are some people trying to survive. Now, they do show the good side of humanity too, don't get me wrong, but here, I mean, the movie focuses on exactly where human beings have gone wrong, and that's, well, the love of money and the love of oneself instead of others. But even though this movie does showcase some terrible characters, I found myself rooting for some amazing actors in this movie. My favorite character in the sequel is Juni. She is awesome. She is a great driver, and she's incredibly smart. Juni and her sister Yeon are just co-pilot and pilot. They're awesome. I love them together. They have this really good chemistry on screen together, and acting wise, I think they balance the tone of it being very dramatic and very action oriented incredibly well. And their grandfather was so lovable. I mean, yes, he's played up to be this kooky old man who really loves his grandchildren and his daughter and will do anything to save them, so immediately it plays to the heartstrings. You know, I just felt good about this cast. And one of the things that worked really well for Peninsula is that they empowered Min Jung, and she is the mother to both Juni and Yeon. And let me tell you guys, the fact that she was able to just carry such bravado in her performance, and she was able to just like be stoic for the most part while still shedding layers and letting us know as an audience that she is still a caring mother. She did such an amazing job in this movie. And the action set pieces were so fun. I know people come to a zombie movie expecting cool kills and amazing gunfight and hand-to-hand combat. The movie did deliver on that. The car chase sequences were my absolute favorite. Juni, the way she can drive, boy, put her in the next Fast and Furious movie, okay? She is so good at what she does. And I mean, yes, there was some CGI involved and it wasn't necessarily real driving most of the time, but it still felt pretty darn good. And while these scenes were disturbing, the dogfight sequences, I mean, man, they were impacting, and they were gut-wrenching. They made me feel a certain way, so I figured, you know, hey, they did their job. It is disgusting, and it made me feel sick. But again, they were well shot and well choreographed, so I don't know, they were some of the most memorable scenes in the movie. And I really do like that the gunfight sequences were not just simply shoot, shoot, goodbye. There were a lot of hand-to-hand combat moments too, and that really comes via our main character. Gong Dong-won is pretty good as Jung Seok, and he is able to compose himself in a nice way, so when you're seeing him fight, it's like his signature style. So I felt like, he really made this role his own. And then there's one thing I loved about Train to Busan, and that was the soundtrack. Here, I'm not gonna lie, I think the score was pretty darn good, and it also changed depending on the environment and the characters that you are following. So I really appreciated the fact that this movie immersed you in more ways than one. However, not all of Peninsula worked. While I do love some of our characters here, I felt the character development was lacking severely in this sequel. I mean, Jung Seok is, again, the straight man. We get introduced to him early in the movie, but after that, I felt like there was no real arc for his character. I understand that there were some moments where you start to see the emotional side of him, but at the same time, I never really felt like we got to understand the character. And then sometimes he's just nothing more than a really good action star with minimal dialogue, and that was a little disappointing for me. And then we have our villains, which were just kind of generic, to be honest. And it's sad because I know in Train to Busan, our main villain, that's the COO of the Stallion Express, he had a decent story. But here, I almost feel like Peninsula doesn't necessarily give time or enough time to our villains to make us kind of either empathize or sympathize with them and then see their point of view. Honestly, it was just like, whatever, I don't want him, just zombies can eat him. And then compared to the first film, there wasn't one character that made me emotional. So Don Lee's sacrifice in the first movie, oh my god, it almost made me cry. But here, I mean, not so much. There wasn't one character that I can tell you got me to that point. So yes, it's kind of a problem maybe with the writing versus the acting, but I almost wish we would have gotten that moment that is definitive and that you can say, oh my gosh, this moment's gonna make you cry. Now on the technical side, the CGI is a little rough here. To be honest with you, it's shot mainly in the dark, so a lot of the shortcomings with the CGI you kind of don't notice too often, but in those car chase sequences, boy, let me tell you. You can notice that CGI. The first film had an issue with that too, but I figured 4 years later, it's probably got a little bit of a bigger production budget because the first film was so popular. But here, unfortunately, you don't get much better CGI, and that was kind of a bummer. And then there's one thing that might be a nitpick, but honestly, I kind of wish director Yeon Sang-ho kept this movie in full Korean. Now, unfortunately, I think, I get he's trying to pander to an American audience too, but it just felt a little jarring and the English dialogue wasn't as smooth. I just wish they would have kept it in the native language. And then I'll say one thing about the ending, again, spoiler free. I think it lasted a little too long. You could have done without all the slow-mo and the dramatics, the what-if scenarios. We honestly knew where the story was going by that point and what was going to happen, and they just lingered, and it almost took me out of the mood of the movie. I mean, the pacing was pretty good, and then up to that point, I almost felt like, okay, can we just end here? But overall, you guys, Peninsula is one of those movies that isn't a direct sequel. I mean, it, yes, plays in the same universe, but no characters from the first movie show up. It's basically a movie on its own, and it does well for the most part, but it just has those few knocks that hold it back from being really good. Am I disappointed? Absolutely not, and I do recommend this movie, especially if you're a fan of the first film. Now, if you're not, you'll still have a decent time with this zombie movie. There's a lot of action, there's not as much emotion as the first movie, but I think you'll still find some characters to love just like I did. There's just not that one definitive moment that I can tell you I loved from this movie. Everything was either good to average, nothing was ever great. So because of that, hey, it's, again, not as good as the first film, but I still enjoyed it for the most part. Well, there you have it, guys. That's my spoiler-free review of Peninsula. Now I want to hear your thoughts. Go ahead and get loud down below in the comments and let me know what you think of this movie. Like this video and hit that big red button below and subscribe to the channel. Guys, this weekend's gonna be wild. We got DC fandom coverage. I'm gonna try to squeeze in a Legend of Korra reaction this week too. I'm just gonna have a lot of fun. But I'm also going to need a lot of coffee. I don't even have any coffee. Alrighty guys, well I'm going to go get prepared for this weekend. Again, thank you so much for checking out this review, and I'll catch you at the next screening.